make sure my speakers are muted so I don't hear the stream. Is this your first one, Mike?
You're muted, Mike.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. No, I've done Zoom hearings before.
Okay. All right. Let's be on the record in case number 2019-CR1298, caption State of Kansas versus Frank Bernard Jackson. Would the parties announce their appearances, please?
May it please the court, the state appears to Maurice Brewer.
Defendant appears in person by and through Michael Redmond.
All right. We're here set down today for a plea hearing. Mr. Jackson, to take up your plea today, I'm going to have to ask you a lot of questions, okay? If at any time I ask you something, you don't understand it, you tell me that so you and I can talk about it. We can make sure we're both on the same page, okay?
Okay.
Anytime you hear a question, you want to talk to Mr. Redmond in private before you answer that question, you just tell me that. I've got the ability here to send you basically to a private room with him so that you can talk to him in private and then you come back and join us, okay?
Okay.
All right. To do this, I need to have you sworn in. So if you'd raise your right hand, my court reporter will swear you in.
You solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Tell me God.
Thank you.
Mr. Jackson, how did you go in school?
Excuse me?
How far did you go in school?
To 1 year in college.
All right. You reading right okay?
Sorry, it's kind of hard to hear on this.
Okay. And it's important that you hear everything. So if you don't hear anything, we'll take as long as we have to, okay? You make sure you hear every question. I asked you to read and write okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. As you sit here today, are you under the influence of any alcohol or drugs or prescription medicine that might keep you from understanding what you're doing?
No, sir.
Feel like your mind's clear today?
Yes, sir.
You know what you're charged with?
Yeah.
All right. And you know that you don't have to change your plea from not guilty to guilty. If you wanted to maintain that not guilty plea, you would have an absolute right to a jury trial in this case. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
All right. At that trial, the state would have to put on enough evidence to prove you guilty. You wouldn't have to prove anything yourself. Mr. Redmond would be able to help you throughout that trial. He would cross-examine in front of all of the state's witnesses and their evidence. He could call any witnesses you wanted called. You would have a right to testify at that trial, but you would also have a right not to testify. And if you decided not to, the state couldn't use that against you to try and argue that you must be guilty. Do you understand all that?
Yes, sir.
If we had that trial, at the end of the trial, you were convicted, you would have a right to appeal that conviction to an appellate court. If you didn't have the money to do that, a lawyer would be appointed to do it for you. You understand that?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, if we go forward with this plea today, there's not going to be any kind of trial in this case at all, and you're going to be giving up all of those rights that I just went over with you. You understand that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, I know Mr. Redmond's gone over the plea petition with you today, before we came on today, and I am going to pull that up for you on screen so we can all look at it. Tell me if you can. One second. Tell me if you can see this document.
Yes, sir.
You recognize that document?
Yes.
All right. This is the plea petition that Mr. Redmond went over with you, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now it talks about the plea agreement here, and I'm going to read it to you. It says that you're agreeing to plead to count 2, which is possession of marijuana with intent to distribute. That's a severity level 3 non-person drug felony. That the state is going to dismiss the other 2 counts. The parties are going to agree to recommend the standard sentence and recommend probation. That part of that probation, you would be required to obtain a substance abuse evaluation, and if treatment was recommended, to obtain that treatment. Is that your understanding of the entire plea agreement?
Yes, sir.
Has anybody promised you anything else to get you to plead guilty today?
No, sir.
Anyone placed any force or threats against you to make you plead guilty today?
No, sir.
All right. Now I see as part of this plea agreement, it talks about what the parties are going to recommend as sentencing, at sentencing. You understand, while I'm going to listen really closely to all of those recommendations, I'm not bound by any of them, and I can give you any sentence that the law allows me to give you. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
All right. Mr. Redmond, do you have an expectation of what Mr. Jackson's criminal history score is going to be?
Yeah, we think he's 9.
Okay. You agree with that, Mr. Brewer?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. So I'm sure Mr. Redmond also went over with you the sentencing guidelines and where you would fall on that, with the idea and the prediction based on what he knows about your criminal history. When we're done with this plea hearing, I'm going to order what's called a pre-sentence investigation, and that is going to report your official criminal history. The parties will have a chance to take a look at it and make sure that it's accurate. But I can't say as the judge what your criminal history score is until we have a finalized PSI. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Jackson, you look like you might be frozen. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, sir. Can you hear me? Hello?
There you are. Did I lose you for a while?
It was working on my end. I must have just froze on over here.
Anybody else having difficulty?
No, I can hear him. See him.
Judge, I think you're freezing.
Maybe I'm frozen. That looks better. Can you hear me, Mr. Jackson?
Yes, sir.
All right. Where did I lose you? Or did I?
Yeah, you didn't.
Okay, good. All right. So what I have to do for today's hearing is assume that you have the very worst criminal history possible so I can advise you what the maximum that anybody could get for this crime is. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
All right. So the maximums, and I pulled it up here in the plea petition as well. The maximum for this crime is 83 months in prison and a fine of $300,000 with a post-release supervision duration of 36 months. Do you understand that that's the maximum sentence anybody could get in this case?
Yes, sir.
All right. Mr. Jackson, do you have any questions for either me or Mr. Redmond about anything that we've gone over today?
No, sir.
All right. Mr. Redmond, do you know any legal reason why your client should not plead today?
No, Judge.
All right. Then I would ask you, Mr. Jackson, as to count 2, that being possession of marijuana with intent to distribute, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
All right. I want you to listen close because I'm going to ask Mr. Brewer to tell me what he thinks the evidence at trial would be. When he's done, I'm going to ask you if that's what happened, okay? Mr. Brewer.
On or about November 15th, 2019, members of the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department executed a search warrant at the defendant's home located at 5717 Locust Avenue in Kansas City, Wyandotte County, Kansas. In the northwest basement bedroom, officers found 62.1 grams of marijuana. The marijuana was field tested by Officer Vallejo. It was presumptively positive for the presence of marijuana. Also in that room, they found an insurance card that belonged to the defendant. If this were to go to trial, Detective Seal would testify that this amount was indicative of that for sale, based upon the fact that present in the room was also baggies, the digital scale, U.S. currency amounting to $1,935, and also they found $80 of money that they used in undercover buys. Those are
All
the
right.
facts.
Mr. Jackson, is that what happened in this case?
Yes, sir.
All right. I will find the defendant has freely, voluntarily, and intelligently entered his plea of guilty. He understands the nature of the charges and the consequences of the plea. there is a sufficient factual basis for a finding of guilt, and I will in fact find that Mr. Jackson is guilty of count 2, the possession of marijuana with intent to distribute. Per the plea agreement, the other counts are dismissed. I'm going to order a pre-sentence investigation be prepared and continue this for sentencing pending the receipt of that. Let me take a look at my calendar, such as it is here, see if we can pick a date. Mr. Redmond, do you have any problem doing the sentencing by Zoom as well?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Let's see. So need about 6 weeks. I'm looking at October 23rd. I have a 11 o'clock available on October 23rd. Mr. Redmond?
That's fine.
Mr. That work for you, Mr. Brewer?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, 10:23 at 11 for a sentencing. Mr. Jackson, your attorney, when he sent me that plea petition, also sent me that PSI request, and it has your contact information on it. I'm going to forward that over to probation today, okay? So they should be in touch with you, hopefully in the next week, but certainly in the next 2 weeks to set up an interview for your pre-sentence investigation, okay? If 2 weeks go by and you haven't heard from probation, reach out to Mr. Redmond because something went wrong and I want to make sure it gets done so we can get your sentencing done on that date, okay?
Okay.
All right. Anything else for our record today?
No, sir.
Your Honor,
Yes.
I
Oh,
might have forgot if we did this, and if I did, I'm a little late. Did we need a waive prelim? I mean, at this point, we've already done the plea, but I
I didn't know there wasn't a waiver on. We probably should. Mr. Redmond, any objection to waiving your client's right to prelim?
I thought we waived it before, but no, we don't have any objection to that.
All right. I thought you had two, but I could be mistaken. In
Yeah,
any
we may
event,
have. I just didn't have it on the back of the file, and I was starting to write the sentencing date and realized I didn't notate it. So
all right. Then, Mr. Brewer, on behalf of the state, you waive prelim as well?
yes, Your Honor.
All right. I'll show whether it's today or prior hearing, both parties have waived prelim. All right. I do need to tell you, Mr. Jackson, as a convicted felon, it's prohibited for you to own or possess a firearm. Certain kind of deadly cutting instruments like dirks, daggers, switchblades, basically knives that could be considered deadly weapons. Before you decide to own or possess any kind of weapon like that, talk to a good lawyer like Mr. Redmond. Make sure it wouldn't be a reason to revoke a probation or add new charges, okay?
Okay.
All right. We'll see you all on October 23rd at 11 a.m. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Judge.
Great.
Yeah.